So for our next speaker,
Yeah.
Tuomas from Nimble Devices. Oh, take it away.
All right. Hello, everybody. Good to be here. I come from Nimble Devices, a company who does or provides indoor positioning navigation solutions for mobile application developers. Bear with me. This is going to be a little bit more high-level presentation. There might be something of our product also included in it. It's not a marketing pitch, but I'll just explain the current situation with indoor positioning market and why it hasn't gone anywhere, at least from our perspective. Then I'm going to explain how we solve the problem, and then I'm going to the same sort of topic as the guys previously, so going a little bit on what we've learned so far as entrepreneurs, having their first own business and creating actually a product for B2B market. So just looking at the market, outdoor positioning has enabled a lot of different services that provide value to users by just utilizing your location information and the fact that the maps are available worldwide. But we use 90% of our times indoors, and over there these applications are not providing any value at the moment, at least from the geospatial perspective. If you just look at how many commercial buildings there are in the world, just combining US and Europe, there are actually over 10 million commercial buildings, and the market, if you can provide any services to those, is huge. All right, that's from the market perspective. So let's go to something more interesting. Let's take a case. So think of yourselves as, I know this is difficult, but think of yourselves as a project manager. I have a long history in that. I know that if there are any developers over here, you most likely don't like to be in that situation, but try. So you have a task. You need to provide a mobile service that works in a physical location, let's say you're creating an application for the K group or the S group. You want to deliver a service that helps the consumer when they are in that Prisma or city market. Or you're creating that killer app for shopping centers which allows you to find your wife. So basically two things, mobile application, and you have multiple venues that this needs to work in. Let's look a little bit on the market, who's providing services that you could then go and utilize in your product. There's big guys like Apple, Google, then there's like maybe 300 guys worldwide providing similar positioning and mapping solutions to mobile devices. There's some guys like Indoors from Austria and Estimote providing beacons. They are actually from Poland. First, indoor positioning. So what are the building blocks when you want to incorporate indoor positioning in your mobile application? First, you need to select the provider of that indoor positioning system. So that was one of the guys in the previous slide. Then you need to select an infrastructure that will complement that positioning engine that you have selected. All right. The third one is, this is the sort of a critical bit when you want to deploy to a large number of venues. You need to do the on-site calibration on that premises that you are wanting this system to work in. So if you want to bring in indoor positioning to, let's say, Prisma in Kannelmäki, you need to go there with the current solutions that are in the market and actually do the calibration over there, and then it starts to work. Then, if you just have the blue dot in your application on gray background, it doesn't really tell you anything or add value to the consumer. What you want to bring in are the maps. This is what Google does really well outdoors. There are a lot of things related to maps. You first need to have the visuals. That's sort of the paper map that you nowadays have. So you have some pretty graphics that you can look and maybe position yourself on top of that map once you have the blue dot. Then what is interesting in many cases when you're navigating is where you want to go. So that might be, airport, it might be the gate, something, or in any other physical location you want to know where the restrooms are. Of course, in a shopping center that might be a product search. But anyway, that's something to manage. Then there are things like if we are in this room, it would be nice that the application actually knows that we are in an auditorium and it can then do something based on that. And then you need to bring this information actually into your application, so you need to have some kind of a map view or sort of a map widget that is able to then present all of this information that was mentioned above. And then you need to bring in a navigation engine, just like Google Maps provides you outdoors. So these are the sort of building blocks that you need to think about when you want to create your own application that utilizes positioning and maps. And when you look at the technology vendors that are out there, you can sort of categorize them into different segments. So there are the infrastructure providers like Cisco, Aruba, and then all the beacon vendors. I don't know how many of you know about the Bluetooth beacons like iBeacon, all right? Some of you. A small Bluetooth transmitter that basically sends just a unique ID. There's a lot of those in the market, basically I think 30 at least. So a lot of infrastructure providers. Then we have these guys who provide you the blue dot. I think many of the Finnish guys at least know Indoor Atlas. They've managed to raise quite significant amount of funding. Then for the maps and the mapping sort of contextual information, there's a couple of players in the world who do that. Some of them are rather big. All right, so now we go into actually doing the application. What are the roadblocks that have prevented the indoor positioning from coming mainstream? This is our perspective, how we see this problem. And I'm coming to a solution from our side, but let's go first to roadblocks that we see. There were actually a lot of players. Just mentioned a couple of over there. But if you want to do a thorough search on the best provider for your needs, there's a lot of companies that you need to go through. Then comes the cost and risk. So if you're combining maps from this guy, positioning information from this guy, and maybe the points of interest from this guy, you're actually incorporating a lot of different players, SDKs and APIs into your project. And typically that includes at least the time it takes, but most likely it also increases the risks that are involved, because you are combining different components that maybe aren't used the same way in any other project in the world. So you're basically creating a unique combination of solutions. But then now you have the app covered. So you have the mobile app in your app store. But what happens when you need to deploy the positioning system to all those, let's say, 64 Prismas that are in Finland? You end up in wondering how much does it actually cost. So who will you get the infrastructure from? How much does it cost? Who's the provider? Is the service that they can provide good for your needs? What are the lead times? When can you actually deliver that system? And then it comes to the installation. So when you're providing indoor positioning or spreading that network of venues that you want to bring the indoor positioning to, who can do the installation? How technically challenging that installation is? Require calibration. Do you need to actually use a mobile application to do some on-site calibrations? And do you need to do them sometime after you've done the first installation? So how is the maintenance? So who can control changes? So if you look at Google Maps nowadays, can you affect Google Maps if there is something regarding your neighborhood, for example? Typically no. So many of these players who actually provide indoor maps nowadays do not give the control of the venue maps to the venue owner. So it's more about outsourcing your maps to a third party who then controls when something changes. So let's go to our solution, how this solves everything. So our solution is essentially a Bluetooth-based indoor positioning system for mobile applications. We provide or give the application developers all they need in one SDK. So we give them positioning navigation, then we give the information what room this is. We also give the visuals, and we don't need for the visuals any special talent, so it's actually produced automatically, and you can customize it with CSS, which you know very well. The integration bit is quite nice. There's actually a Finnish lead architect working in a company called Quick. The guy's name is Matti, and he said, and this is a quote that we are allowed to give from him is that it took only 20 minutes for him to integrate into an existing app, basically the whole solution that we provide. Simple deployment. So this is solving the problem now when you go on site and want to deploy this in a large scale. So our solution doesn't require any on-site calibrations, and it doesn't require any expertise. So basically the shop owner, for example, can install our system. We provide automated map creation, and that map creation is controlled by the venue owner. I'll give you a practical example. So we have a customer called Messukeskus. They manage their own maps for their mobile application. They have like 100 events annually. The only thing they need to do is upload their CAD file. I don't know if you know what is CAD file, essentially a floor plan of their venue, into our web service, which will automatically create them the indoor maps and the positioning information that the SDK then will use in the mobile application to give you position and capability to search, for example, the exhibitors in that particular exhibition. One nice thing is offline. Actually, offline is just not a nice thing, but it's an essential thing for many services. Everybody's talking about cloud services nowadays. But what happens when you are in Slush is a good example. How many did you go to Slush? All right. How was the network for you guys? Not particularly good. No. All right. We provided, by the way, the positioning for Slush, and there was this requirement is something that was mandatory, because otherwise the positioning wouldn't work at all. Did you try? Any of you try the positioning over there? No. All right. We provided the indoor positioning for Slush now 2 years in a row, and I get that the UI in the application might not really give you a hint that there might be a positioning then. We'll need to fix that for next year. Let's go to lessons learned. So we are a 2.5 years old company created by or founded by 3 basically geeks. And as geeks, we've come across with a lot of things during these 2.5 years that we could have done a lot better. First of all, we did some things well, but I'll go this through. So first, should you plan sort of the next step of your product? So we decided to create a product, indoor positioning solution. We didn't know much about it, but we went for it, and I'll tell you how we ended up where we are now. Then the second thing, partner up, and the last thing is everybody needs a designer. So lessons learned about how did we get here. So our solution is quite different than all the rest in the market, and there's a reason why we are here where we are. One of the reasons is that we just blindly and naively went and just created indoor positioning. And soon we realized that, yeah, you need the maps. That was quite obvious from our side. But then this guy, actually our first customer ever, Guidio, providing solutions for museums, basically. So providing an audio guide for museums. This guy was telling us we had a fancy custom map editor that we just created on top of OpenStreetMaps. We were really proud of that, and we were showcasing that at Slush 2013. Everybody was liking it, but this guy was telling us that he already has the sort of floor plan of those museums. Why does he need to retrace that, on top of OpenStreetMap? Plus, the museums didn't want to have their stuff in OpenStreetMap like Atheneum, because it sort of gives a way for the burglars, a really nice way of figuring out what's the thickness of the walls, like next to the paintings. So he told us that he has all the information in CAD format, and it would be really nice if we could just import the CAD and create the maps and positioning from that. So we did it for this guy, and later on we just realized that that's actually a really nice way, because all the commercial buildings have their floor plans in CAD format, which is sort of, we already have then the maps for every building in the world, basically. Then the second thing, MTA, we rolled out a indoor positioning for the Grand Central Terminal. I think it's one of the biggest metro stations / train stations in New York. And they were asking us to provide routing, and we were like, okay, we can show you your position, and we can show you the sort of destination position, so the point of interest. So these guys wanted the routing, and we were like, okay, let's add the routing. And it was quite obvious to have it, but these guys would, the guys who pushed us to do it. Then came Slush 2014. That was the first year we provided indoor positioning for them. And it became really obvious, like I mentioned, that offline is the key. So offline is not just about providing solutions for airports or providing solutions for tourists who don't want to use roaming networks. It's actually a way to scale your solution. So you are not dependent on any local network. The guys were talking about AVS. It doesn't really help how much you have bandwidth in the AVS side or auto-scaling if the local network fails, like it did in Slush. And the same thing sort of applies to many places, particularly that utilize Wi-Fi as the backbone. So offline is one. And the last one was Messukeskus, who came as our customer 2015. They showed us that they wanted our solution, but initially they didn't want positioning. It was just the maps and the way to auto-generate the maps, make the map generation easy for them, that was worthwhile for them to take our solution. Later on, they can just basically pay us more and get the positioning, but the idea that maps come before positioning sort of turned our company around in a way, in a not in any other way, but mentally. Like we were all about positioning, and then we started to realize that our customers are actually lacking the maps. The positioning is something that will bring value once they have these, but actually not so many buildings in the world have a map that you can use well in a mobile application. So that's sort of the first problem to solve, and if you can bring in the indoor positioning on top of that easily, it's the way to go. Then I'll just have two things over here. So lessons learned, partner up. For small startups, so if you're creating a company with 3 guys and all of them are geeks, you need to find expertise elsewhere, and feedback. Feedback is essential. We learned that really quickly. So if you just create a product is like bringing 3 engineers to create a product and not have anyone to supervise them or give them feedback is a bad equation. So find somebody who can criticize you, but also who can bring you business, because 3 engineers creating something, the sales isn't the first priority at that point. So get somebody who's having the same goal as you are. So with us, it was the museum application. They wanted to sell their solution, which included indoor positioning, to museums. So win-win. If they sell something, we sell something. On the other hand, he wouldn't sell unless we would be included in his solution. But this is important. When you build in long relationships with other startups or similar entities, it's all about the personal trust, because you need to give a lot of information to them in order to get honest feedback. So trust in these guys. But also, this is important, give you pain. You want to get pain. As an entrepreneur creating a product, somebody external is needed to give you enough pain for you to really push it forward to the right direction. And the last bit, get a designer. So we learned this really too late. So we got a designer on board. He's working as a freelancer, so you don't need to maybe bring as a core member of the team necessarily a designer. You need to have a designer on board with your company. He really helps you to understand your customers' pains. Typically an engineer always looks at the problem from the engineering side, like we did, and we try to do a really good indoor positioning system, but it doesn't matter if it's really difficult from the from the other side, from the customer's side, to either deploy or take into use in the application. And also, designers are really good at crystallizing your product's message to the consumer, to the customers. As an engineer, making marketing material or trying to sell, it's very difficult when you know that it's the best, but there's no words to describe it. So these guys are really good at that. And overall, they are there to ask the right questions, and you are the one to answer to those questions. But somebody needs to raise those alarms when you're doing something just because it's nice from engineering perspective. This was sort of my sort of not so techy approach to tell you a little bit about indoor positioning, what we do, and what we've learned in the past 2.5 years that we've created the company with 3 gigs. So this is it. Any questions? No?
That's quick.
I do have a question.
How about floors? Because like Grand Central, you
Yeah.
have the like routing is probably also involves different floors.
Yes.
How
so
do you handle that?
Grand Central, there was 3 floors actually. There's the subway level, then there's a mezzanine, and on top of there's the train station. Well, to be honest, having indoor positioning and indoor maps, having floor detection and multi-floor support is quite essential. So you actually see a lot of the solutions that work in just a single floor, not to mention any names, but honestly, indoor positioning, if you don't have floor detection, is quite bad. So it's all built into it. So actually, one of the guys, the main sort of engineer, has a background in creating stuff on top of OpenStreetMaps, which really help in creating a solution that is, from the beginning, is scalable from just the individual buildings to large-scale airports and such. Anything else? Yep.
Where do you see the biggest business potential in Finland in addition to Slush type of?
Well, to give you honest answer to that, Slush and exhibitions are not our sort of they're a nice place to show things like what you've created, but it's still a effort for just a 2-day event. So typically we would work with like Messukeskus for permanent installations. But the big business I see currently being more, everybody's talking about consumers, whether it's retail or something else. I see constantly more and more stuff happening in industrial side and sort of building management, for example. Just helping out staff to be more efficient, be more happy in their work. So even airports are more interested in, some of them at least, more interested in providing better tools and solutions for their staff to find each other, find where the missing wheelchairs are when they are needed, and only as a sort of a priority number 3 or 4 comes the consumer solutions of how to find your gate. Because it's much more easy to find the return on investment when you're making your staff more efficient rather than providing a better user experience for the consumer. So I see more in the sort of a building management and
B2B side.
it's actually B2B also in the sort of a customer side.
Because I think the biggest problem is that in terms of B2C business is that you need to have the app installed.
Yeah, and there needs to be a lot of there needs to be initiative for when you're bringing the consumer. You need to have, most likely the staff needs to use it, and then if you're talking about, for example, retail, so the consumer needs to use it, initiative for them, but also if they are, for example, ordering service in a retail facility, then the staff needs to use it. So then there's a lot of more stakeholders that need to convince about that the service is really useful, whereas for the B2B it's much easier. Any other questions?
Yeah, I actually had an idea
Yeah.
about that. And if you go to a store, or do you have any customers here in Finland, like in, let's say, Kauppakeskus or?
Nothing that would be publicly out from the sort of retail perspective. There are museums from this one customer, then we have some in States, but no retail example from Finland at the moment.
Yeah, I guess in the future the retail business could have some kind of information how long the customer stays in our shop.
Yeah.
Or what
Yeah.
kind of food.
Yeah, to give. Yeah. So about the how the analytics for retailers, I guess.
Yeah.
Yeah. So to be honest, like retailers already track you when you're in their stores. They use cameras and all the other, also your radio in your mobile phone. Basically, they're tracking maybe your Wi-Fi. So they already have these sort of people flow metrics in their premises. What they don't have is an understanding who you are, or a way to provide you customized service based on your positioning. So this is something that we are bringing into the game, is bringing the Same thing as the GPS has brought outdoors. We're bringing that to consumers indoors. The tracking bit is already taking place. So if you go to airports or retailers, they are already tracking you, regardless if you are opt-in or not.
How's your business model nowadays evolving? So I guess it's currently not that
Yeah. Yeah. So the business model is a good question. It looks like the model that we've selected is also now sort of the industry standard. So charging per venue is the current model, because the venues who want to bring indoor positioning in their premises, they typically have a business over there and a business reason to bring it over there. So we're actually giving the mobile SDK for free to anyone to integrate in their app. But the venues who want to bring indoor positioning and maps available in their building, they need to pay basically a SaaS fee for the service where they can create and maintain the maps. Did that answer your question? So per venue, recurring sort of a SaaS fee is the current model.
How about partners?
So partners like museum apps or people who provide, or companies who provide services for the retailers, with those we can do volume licensing. So the idea is that since they are offloading the pain from us to sell the solution to the end customers, we can offer, because it's a SaaS fee, we can give them a special price when they are providing our solution as part of theirs in a larger scale. So it's all about, like, if you are a large retailer, for example, having 500 stores rather than just one, of course there's a way to handle the pricing per venue at that point. Yep.
Let's take the other questions offline.
All right.
Let's take the other questions offline because we have a 10-minute break now.
Yep.
So please a round of applause for Tuomas from Nimble Devices. And we start again at 5:05, so 4:05 in the Netherlands. So for the people watching the stream.